Welcome to Pulp Mortem, the search for a lost literary treasure from the Pulp era. My name is Jake, and today we're putting on our entomologist hats to examine the Furies. Wait, no, it's pronounced. Oh, that's much different. Oh, God! But first, about the author. Keith Roberts was a British author born September 20th, 1935, and died in 2000 at the age of 65. He first published in Science Fantasy magazine in 1964, and it was off to the races after that. He often wrote under the pseudonyms Alastair Bevan, David Stringer, and his middle names, John Kingston. Roberts was also an accomplished artist. I would say that he is most well known for Pavane and Kite World, but in truth he was notorious for being a talented but difficult author, with well-documented blow-ups and falling outs with editors, publishers, and fellow authors. Despite being nominated for Hugo and Nebula Awards, he never won, although Roberts was awarded 4 BSFA awards for Best Artwork, Novel, and Short Story twice. Which brings us to the Furies. The rule of the Wasps.
Now look here, Zinthrop, what's all this nonsense about wasps?
It all started with a nuclear test that went wrong. The test cracked the bed of the sea, raised a volcano the height of Vesuvius, where before there had been a 5-mile deep. Then the Furies struck. Monstrous and deadly wasps, nearly the size of a man. Their nests sprang up all over the world. They descended and slaughtered humanity at will, breeding in their nests by the billions. They began enslaving the earth. Not since H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds has there been such a chillingly authentic story of an invasion from another world.
Keep my name out your mouth!
The Furies is Keith Roberts' first novel. It was initially published in Science Fantasy in 3 parts in 1965, and a year later, the Hart Davis hardcover was printed along with this Berkeley paperback that I own. It is 192 pages and initially cost 50 cents. There's no cover artist credited and no signature visible. It is a similar style of Roberts' later work, so in my headcanon, yeah, he did it. I do have some issues with the cover. It's well painted and the drab colors and bleak tone match the story. The hives are cool, but this front wasp here is comedically framed. Also, why are there a bunch of naked men just milling about? And if you squint, some of these poses are more than a little suspect. The story was so well received that the BBC Radio adapted the story into a 6-part radio program in 1970. The paperback here goes for about $10 to $13 online, while the hardcover goes for $200 to $300 for poor condition, and I've seen near mint go for upwards of $600. Also, let's clear the air. I'm not going to use the "not the bees" gif, even though you were all expecting it. Listen, we are a serious, professional organization over here at Pulp Mortem, and I speak for my staff as well. If there's low-hanging fruit, then we'll just leave it for the smaller, younger YouTube channels.
Right.
The story opens up with Bill Sampson, a successful cartoonist living in the small village of Wiltshire. Bill and his dog lead a quiet, unassuming life. Bill soon meets his neighbor, a teenage girl named Jane, and they strike up a friendship, kind of in the same spirit as Clarice and Montauk a la Fahrenheit 451. It's cute. And then one day, yikes! Giant dog-sized bees attack! Around the same time, the earth is shook, cracks apart from simultaneous nuclear or hydrogen bombs, depending on which back cover you own. Devastated, rural England is besieged by these wasps, as Bill and Jane have to use their wits to survive. But what starts out as a fairly standard apocalyptic disaster survival tale soon becomes more dangerous as the wasps start to display signs of intelligence. Otherworldly intelligence.
And I would be armed with a stinger for the fence.
Our hero soon finds himself caught up with a ragtag group of freedom fighters who refuse to bow down to the rule of the wasps.
Freedom.
No. And all-out war ensues. Exciting, right? Let's talk about what I liked. Roberts' writing is great. I'm always a little apprehensive when I read an author's first novel while written in the first person, but he wrote with skill and immersion came instantly. I was sucked in from page 1, and schedule allowing, I would have read the whole thing in one sitting. Just based on the level of skill from book number 1, I will definitely be on the lookout for more of Roberts' work. The Wasps. Let's be honest, giant bugs are a pulpy trope, and that's no different here. What is different is that the wasps are actually scary. They are ultra violent, and that juxtaposition between this mindless droning and then the sudden bursts of intelligent thought, I mean, it kept me on my toes. They could have been cannon fodder, they could have been silly, but they were a deadly foe.
Buzzy, 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 happy as a bee.
If nothing else, I was reminded to go put up some wasp traps. Characterization. The characters feel real and believable. Dialogue flows naturally, we have clear goals, and the decisions that are made are logical. Rare, right? Situational grounding. At least I think that's the right phrase. One of the hardest aspects of writing for me is character movement, getting our characters from one place to another while still explaining and describing the surroundings in a way that keeps you locked in and as opposed to pulling back to describe. It sounds easy enough, but in truth, to do it seamlessly, it takes a great deal of skill. Whether in momentum or static, Roberts engages all senses constantly, and the surroundings are dripping with emotion. The ravaged English countryside is stunning and morose, and the hives are alien and visceral. This is good stuff. And now, the bad.
Uh-oh.
For whatever reason, I've noticed that many first novels are written in the first person, which is fine. But many inexperienced authors don't realize when they stray into navel-gazing, free thought, rabbit-trailing speculation.
Pardon me while I pontificate.
I've read entire books that should have been novellas because overindulgent authors refused to edit themselves and their stories just turned to sludge as a result. Roberts only did this once, but it was egregious. It was during one of the most intense moments, and all of a sudden Bill starts speculating as to the nature of the Wasps. The issue here is that this story is meant to be Bill retelling this story from an older age, meaning he already knows the nature of the Wasps. So it just kind of creates this janky, unwanted pause in the action, and I'm never a fan of authors purposefully derailing their momentum.
Uh-oh.
The relationship between Bill, who's 28, and Jane, who's 16, starts to show some hints that they may be interested in being more than friends. No slight on Roberts, because the age of consent in the UK is 16. But as an American reading this and not knowing that, it might make you a little bit uncomfortable. It still might be a little uncomfortable.
Uh-oh.
Character introduction overload. This is probably one of my biggest pet peeves. Exactly halfway through the book, we are introduced to no less than 10 characters, including both of their names, their backstory, and a brief description about them, all in under a page and a half. Let me tell you something, Keith. When you do this, you are not describing 10 characters. You are describing 0 characters. I always view doling out information like playing catch. If you throw something to somebody, one thing they can catch it, right? If you throw 2 things at the same time, most people can catch 2 things. If you throw 3 things at the same time, if they're really focused, if your reader is really focused, they can handle 3 things suddenly at the exact same time. But if you throw 30 things in the air, nobody catches anything. If you hand your reader that much information and expect them to hold it, I have news for you, they're going to drop the whole thing. Wasps aren't fun, but this book had a bit. Salisbury sayings, and that's hard to say. I'm obviously not a Brit, and so many of the phrases and sayings in here, it might as well have been another language to me. That must have been a do. Been it? The wind is bustin', see? There were a good crash. Reckon I do a quart recce. You kiss your mother with that mouth? Better not play, Bill. It sounds a ruddy tutu. The devil of a rose summed it up nicely. But did it? Sometimes I was able to ascertain the meaning based on the context, but a majority of the time I was SOL. Oh, that's American for So what's the verdict? Personal collection. For being a tired trope, this book has no business being as good as it is. I'm still thinking about it days later. It isn't a perfect book or even a great book, but it succeeds in what it set out to do. Tell a gripping story that keeps you engaged from the first to last page. This book deserves to be owned, it deserves to be read. Now, as I say, I don't care for the paperback. I would love the hardcover, but there's no way I'm going to drop a couple hundo on it. But the used bookstores, thrift shops, and antique stores of the world better look out. And that's my review of The Furies. Have you read this book? Is there another Keith Roberts that you would recommend? Do you have any suggestions as to what I should read next? If so, please let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time for Beyond the Galactic Lens.
Oh, no, not the beast! Not the beast!